Hello, welcome to our webinar. Sorry for the delay. We were just trying to get our ducks in a row, this new way of life here. So this webinar, we're going to go through a quick presentation, and we'll have the audience muted. And then after the presentation, we will open it up to comments. And you'll be able to type in questions or comments, and we'll do our best to answer those. So without further ado, let's get started here. So this is a public info session for a recreational facility next to Leo Drive in the Bailey Brook area. Right now, we have our panelists who are able to talk. Right now would be Lindsay Butler from the City of Gardner, Conservation and Planning Agent, Trevor Beauregard, City of Gardner, Department of Community Development and Planning Director, and Jeff LeGros, Department of Community Development Planning, also with the City of Gardner, and myself, John Allard. I'm a landscape architect with Fuston O'Neill. I was responsible for the project management and of the engineering and design of this project. So welcome. Jeff, are you there? Do you want to take over and give a little background to this project?
Sure. Hi, my name is Jeff LeGros with the City of Gardner, Department of Community Development and Planning. And just real quick, I guess I'll go over the project. So the Fernwood Drive, Leo Drive, Brookside Drive neighborhood was a subdivision that was initiated as far back as the mid-1980s and really has been ongoing until just recently. Some of the final homes have just been built on Brookside Drive. So over a period of really 30 years or so, the neighborhood has developed and what is now about 300 homes in the neighborhood. It's become one of the largest neighborhoods in the City of Gardner. Because it's a rural neighborhood outside of the downtown area or separated from other neighborhoods, there wasn't suitable access to a park or a playground for this particular neighborhood. The closest park is about a little over a mile away, the Oliver Case Park and Playground, located off of Park Street. And as a result, the initial subdivision plans called for a park to be part of the subdivision. But over time, through multiple developers, the park wasn't constructed as part of the subdivision. And so recently, the city saw an opportunity to promote a park and playground in that area and to apply for grant funding to do it. A couple of years ago, there was a forest cutting on a large parcel of land that was known as the Amelia property, and that property was slated at one point for a housing subdivision of approximately 50 homes. The residents in the neighborhood knew of that and were somewhat concerned and had asked the city if we had looked at conserving the property. And indeed, we had talked about that. And so through a park grant and a land grant, we were able to protect that full 115 acres and a portion as conservation land, 84 plus acres, and then the remaining 36 acres as parkland. And that's the land that's closest to Leo Drive. And that's the area that we're talking about and discussing the design of a park here today.
Thanks, Jeff. One thing I failed to mention at the beginning is this is being recorded, and we are going to link this up and post it to the city website after. So if anyone's leaving early and are afraid they're going to miss something or didn't get their chance to ask a question that they wanted to ask, we do have information on the last slide. You can follow up with Lindsay, and have your question heard. So moving forward, just to orient ourselves, north is towards the right side of the screen. We have Bailey Brook that runs along the western side of the property, which is the top of the screen. Clark Street, we looked at potential access from Clark Street, which is on the south side of the property. And Leo Drive is on the east side of the property, with the residences there on the bottom of the screen. Now, you can see that there is, I guess, what's out there right now. A lot of people know what's out there right now. There was a logging event that occurred, I believe, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, it was the winter of 2016-17, where they came in and they clear cut a good portion of the site, leaving behind stumps and debris in their wake. So right now, it is sparse, but we have some people that looks like they've utilized the area with walking trails. There is a large logging trail that had been established where the larger machines were going. There was a laydown area in the center of the site, which is the flat portion of the site, which we focused our design area on. Like I said, there was some walking trails that have been created by dog walkers, but mostly, if we can consider it wooded, it's a wooded area. Access to the site, there's 4 potential access points. I don't know if my cursor, yeah, here we go. Down on Clark Street, this right of way off of Leo Drive, another right of way right across from Margot Way, and this is shown as a roundabout. It used to be a roundabout, but no longer. And there's another right of way at the northern side of the property that with potential access. Earlier, I said we focused on the center of the site merely because that would be the easiest constructability for playfields and parking lots, rather than on the hillside, which led us to that an access point right across from Margot Way. And I should mention, Lindsay, Jeff, Trevor, if I miss anything, just interrupt me along the way. This will be somewhat of a formal, informal presentation. Here are some pictures from the site. The one on the bottom left here is that right-of-way access from Leo Drive right across from Margot Way. This is where the logging trucks were coming in and out of. Here is that laydown area that I talked about. This is where they would stockpile all the lumber for transport. And another area that we are, that was a part of our design, was a wetland overlook area overlooking the wetlands of Bailey Brook. You can see, you get a little glimpse of it already. Like I said, there's a bunch of just walking trails throughout the property. So here is the extent of our proposed design. Again, we're looking at some recreational play fields, playground equipment, a trail system, wetlands overlook area, and obviously parking and landscape buffering for the nearby residences. I included a picture of a wetland overlook in the top corner there. The binoculars are not part of the design, but this is something similar to what we consider to be proposed for this area. And I wanted to talk about that now because our focus was to preserve much of this land as a natural system rather than kind of come and bulldoze the entire site. We strategically put the fields and the parking on lesser topography because we needed those flat areas, and that led us to leave a lot of the land for a walking trail system, and we utilized existing walks that are already there. We did include some accessible walkways that are in and around the play fields and the playground so that everyone can kind of enjoy this area. Now here's the core of the design. As you can see, there's an entry off of Leo Drive. We're proposing to keep it rather a natural area where this would be a gravel parking area, able to house somewhere close to 150 parking spaces. Much of that is located at the center of the site, and then there's an arm along the soccer fields and practice fields. I mentioned an accessible walking trail in the beginning. Our thoughts were to include handicap parking spaces in the corner here. This area that I'm circling with my cursor here is a proposed restroom area. It was not a part of the design. It will be part of a secondary phase, but this would be a concrete pad and eventual restrooms. So the thought was to keep another handicap accessible spaces closer to playground areas, restrooms, just the core of the site. Along with that, we are proposing an accessible walking trail that kind of goes around the soccer field and makes its way back along the gravel access path and then back to the restroom area. This whole entire loop is about a third of a mile, so kind of a cool thing is if you're watching your kids playing soccer and you want to take 3 trips around that accessible walking trail, you've walked a mile, so it's a good way to gauge how much exercise you're getting. One of the things that we're always cognizant about on sites like this is stormwater, especially if we're doing a lot of pushing of dirt here and there, and we're creating a different drainage pattern. We're always cognizant about where the water is going to go. So we've included a few areas for rain gardens for stormwater collection. One of the major ones is right along the parking area, in between the parking area and the soccer field here. Another on the west side of the practice field, and then another on the south side of the parking area over here. I'll get into it a little bit further in the presentation, but the soccer fields are, this one shown right here is a high school regulation size soccer field. The thought is that you could split these fields up into 3 soccer fields for practice or recreational games, under 10 age group. 3 of those fields would fit east-west on this high school regulation soccer field. We want to be cognizant of the neighbors as well, because this whole place has been cleared, and we are proposing a additional buffer to what's already existing here. There's a 30-foot landscape buffer that we're proposing as part of this project as well. And last but not least, we have a what we're calling a play trail. So not a huge playground equipment, but more so stations. And I'll get to this later in the presentation. But these stations would include climbing and swinging features, but they are all spaced out along this little loop of a playground area. So this is just a zoom in of what we were just talking about here, and like I was saying, the playground that we are focused on is more of a trail system with some climbing and swinging structures. There would be four separate stations with the rubberized surfacing for the surface material. Here's a better view of the rain garden, of the stormwater collecting in the rain garden, and here's that future restroom area. Again, about 80 spaces in this parking area. We don't have it striped out because it is going to be gravel parking area with a few landscape islands with some additional landscape in this. And again, this is the start of that accessible trail loop around the PlayStation playground is also going to be accessible all the way around and to. So we were proposing some wayfinding signage at the beginning of the trail, and playground signage within the play area. And here are some of the features that we are thinking about for the play trail. Each little station will have a theme, whether it is the beehive with the honeycombs or the dragonflies or the butterflies. Each of these stations is specific to a certain thing, and each of these stations will have a sign, just an informational, educational sign within the play area, so kids can learn while they're playing. You can see some of these structures have your typical swing, and but in a very kind of unique way. We've tried to avoid throwing these enormous play structures in such a natural environment. Each of the stations will there will be two stations for what we consider tot lot age groups, and then two other stations that are a little bit older age group, where you see more of the climbing areas. Moving our way over to the soccer fields, I already hinted upon the high school regulation size soccer field and another practice field. The high school soccer field can be split up into three under 10 size soccer fields going east and west. Again, here's that accessible trail, a third of a mile along the whole perimeter. And one of the really cool features about this the fields is that they actually sit down in the site a good I'd say 5 or 6 feet, which allows people to park head in, and they can watch their kids play from the car, or even sit on a sloped lawn area as a kind of a mock bleacher system. Again, looking at the kind of the natural environment rather than chain link fence everywhere. We've included a timber guardrail, which is more of a park feel to it. Although on the west side of the soccer fields, to prevent, because there's a lot of grade change on the site. Even though we're lowering the field level, there's still quite a drop off on the west side of the field. So any balls that are over kicked, we would install a chain link fence or a timber guardrail / buffer barrier, so that the balls just don't go screaming down the hill. Here's that 30-foot landscape buffer to the property line, strategically placing the landscape to give some privacy to the adjacent landowners in this area. And I believe that wraps up the presentation. I don't know if any of the other panelists want to follow up with anything, but on this slide, Lindsay Butler, who is one of the panelists tonight, is graciously answering all questions that you guys might have that you might not be able to ask tonight. So right now, panelists, do you have anything further you want to say before I open up the floor to questions?
That's Trevor speaking. I just think we should, if the general public want to ask questions, let's do it through the question bubble on the screen first. And once we, if the people that want to ask questions, just identify yourselves, your name, and feel free to ask the question. And after we're done that, if there are any additional people that are calling in and don't have access to that, or just have a question that's too long to type in, then we can answer those directly.
Okay, so I will now do my best to open up the floor to people. I guess we've already got that down. Attendees can now ask questions and raise their hands. So here's some questions that are rolling in. First question here. Do the other panelists see the questions, or am I the only one that is able to see these questions popping up? No one else is seeing them?
No, I can't see anything.
Okay, so the first.
I can read them off, yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely read them off. So the first question here, it says, the neighborhood expressed that they did not want a soccer field. Why design it in? Anyone want to handle that? Anyone from the city?
Sure, I'll take a shot at it.
Okay.
It's been a priority of the city for a long time. It's been identified as being a need of the city, and we thought it'd be a good fit in this location.
Thank you, Trevor. Jessica Hall from 338 Leo Drive. Do you anticipate night soccer games / lighting?
I think that was brought up and discussed at a preliminary meeting, other department heads. And I think the option was going to be there so that we could put them in the future, but not at the beginning.
Yeah. So what we've done, and lighting is always a big issue with light trespass, especially when we have residences really close by. A lot of times we do parking lot lighting for security purposes. A lot of people think that, you know, having lights at night invites people in, but it also gives police officers the ability to see what's going on in back there. Any lights that do go in the parking lot, they're not designed as part of this phase, but any lights that do go on, would go in the parking lot, would be full cutoff night sky compliant lights. So the light trespass to the neighborhood would not, shouldn't be an issue. And as for the soccer fields, Lindsay is correct. We are not, as part of this phase, having any lights for the lighting on the field, but we are proposing to bring an empty electrical conduit down to the site, so that if in the future there is a want, there's a need, that we'd be able to hook into that electrical conduit and have some lighting. All right, let me go back to the questions. They're rolling in here, so that's good. So here's one. The original developer was putting a 100-foot buffer in place. Why only 30 feet? I can answer
John,
that. Well,
I think-
it's a 30-foot setback requirement through the city regulations, and also anything greater than that, we're pushing these soccer fields well into the property, which would pose a lot more problems for getting into like riverfront area and setbacks. That would be my answer. I don't know if anyone from the city wants to answer that as well.
John, my only comment was going to be it's the topography of the site is very challenging, so
Right.
we had to minimize the setbacks to the site for the recreation fields and playground and the associated trails.
Okay. Next question. Elements installed at Dunn's Park did not hold up over time, even on-site personnel. How will the elements be protected? I'm guessing, I'm not sure at Dunn Park. Do you guys know what this is in reference to?
John, it's Trevor again. So Dunn's Park is a state-run park. It's financed and maintained by the state, and so that's their responsibility. This park under the auspices and maintenance of the Department of Public Works and Recreation Department of the city.
Great. Will there be any exterior lighting? We answered that one earlier. What is the plan for the southerly end of the area? So the southerly end of the property. Right now, I don't know, Jeff, was a master plan that we thought we could include maybe some disc golf, something that had a minimal disruption to the area, or just leave it as trails.
Yeah, I mean, currently, I think they're referring to the portion of the site down closest to Clark Street. And
Right.
The Conservation Commission acquired a half-acre lot right abutting Clark Street, so that it connected to the other parkland that's further up along Leo Drive. And it was looked at if it was possible to put an access drive in from that lower part of the site. And I think as part of this initial survey, it didn't look like it was a very feasible option for a couple of different reasons, slope topography being one, and then the second one being the wetland resource areas that are there. So that option at that southern end of the site doesn't look too feasible. So I don't think it's part of this plan, and I don't think it's a realistic or feasible option for the development of the park. But as John stated, there are plans for a 1 mile loop trail that go around the outer portions of the site, the entire site, and that's just what they call an unimproved footpath. It's basically a small trail, 2 to 3 feet wide, with just a natural surface, forested, wooded surface, just like what's out there now. A lot of that loop trail already exists. It's been walked, and portions of it have been flagged. So parts of those trails are already existing out there, and it would only just require some clearing to maintain them as a loop trail. But ideally, a 1 mile loop trail, would be a good thing that you would probably see in the future, encompassing the outer portions of the site. And then other things that have been talked about or considered are disc golf baskets, a disc golf course spread throughout the outer wooded areas, again keeping with the natural landscape and keeping with a primarily forested area. It's already been logged, so the canopy is relatively open, but the idea is that the park and playground area is going to be a centralized feature, and the other portions of the site are a forested open space style park with the wetland overlook and some walking trails, but really keeping it a natural area that will then tie in and connect to the conservation land that exists along the other side of the river. Really, there's hundreds of acres of conservation land and trails that will be accessible from this park area. So that's another benefit that's going to be a really neat thing, to have sort of a gateway into all of that conservation land and those trails.
There's concern with parking on Leo Drive. I guess if the parking area fills up, that there might be parking on Leo Drive out in front of the residences. I think that's more of a patrol.
This is Jeff. I'll speak to this. I mean, I'm not overseeing parking or anything, but as you can see on the plan, it's something that was talked about earlier. And John and the planners at Fuss and O'Neill, the designers, did a good job of making sure that they could maximize the parking area within the site without negatively impacting the entire site. And I think they did a good job with the perpendicular parking overlooking the field. It gains a lot of parking space and open parking area. So there's a considerable amount of parking spaces so that doesn't happen. The last thing that you want to see is overflow parking on a street that doesn't accommodate roadside parking. So it looks like the way this is designed that would not be an issue.
This is Trevor. I'll just mention one thing. I'm on the traffic commission. If it ever did become a problem, we would certainly, as a commission, raise the issue to the city council and ask that they make appropriate measures to stop the parking on Leo Drive.
Next question, is it possible to have a conservation kiosk or learning display that features Bailey's Brook and the other Gardner conservation areas? I will answer that question first, and I don't know if Jeff or Lindsay want to chime in at the end, but over at the wetlands overlook, there was tossed around the idea of having an informational sign that kind of explained, what are the inhabitants of this area, why, what is a wetland and stuff like that. So yes, and as part of that whole play trail stuff, there is not specific to Bailey Brook or the conservation area, but there is some educational kind of environmental signage as well.
This is Jeff. I'll just add to that that I think that any interpretive educational signs within the site are going to be looked at as a favorable addition and an amenity that we want to see in the site. So in addition to those educational kiosks in the play trail area and an educational kiosk about Bailey Brook being a cold water stream and the really a pristine wetland habitat area, in addition to that kiosk at the wetland overlook, there's also plans to incorporate into the trail system so that they're sort of an interpretive nature trail. We've done this behind Haywood Hospital off of the bike path where we have a tree identification loop, and the idea and the goal here at a minimum would be to have a tree identification loop. The most common 10 to 15 native trees and shrubs that exist there naturally would be called out with a small tree identification sign, and any opportunity for interpretive signage similarly with the rain garden and why rain gardens and pollinator habitats and things like that. So the idea is to make this area sort of interface between a park and playground and a natural area where there's a nature trail and interpretive nature signs as well. So I think the more interpretive signage and kiosks we can have out there, the better. Connecting people and especially children with nature is such an important thing nowadays. So the education component is a big part of that, and I think a really key opportunity that we have here for this type of a park and playground. So that's something that I hope is a focus of the final design.
Great. This next one is, I think, a three-part question here. What are the plans to address the traffic? 145 parking spaces is quite a lot. Plans for trash and recycling, and is this meant for the neighborhood or for city leagues, etc.? So there's one about traffic, one about trash and recycling, and one about who the fields are meant for. So I can answer the trash and recycling. We're obviously going to be proposing some trash receptacles around the area. I'm not sure. DBW is going to be kind of involved with the maintenance of this, so there is going to be trash pickup for the traffic. I think Trevor, you spoke to this before, that I don't know if you want to address that, and then the neighborhood leagues. I'm not sure on that one. So if someone can jump in.
Well, I mean, it's obviously going to be, it's being proposed as a neighborhood park, along with some recreational fields that may be utilized by other leagues or schools or residents of the city outside of the neighborhood. I mean, it's and then as far as traffic's concerned, this plan will go before the planning board at our next meeting in May. Honestly, I'm not really sure. I'm not sure if the city engineer is on the call at all tonight, but we really haven't considered the need for a traffic study. However, it's not out of the question, and I think it needs to be discussed a little more as far as the amount of potential traffic and the impacts. So that's something I think the planning board can have a little more input on in the very near future.
And John, I'd just like to add to that too, when we think of the traffic, it's not all the time that you would see a significant amount of traffic. It would just be dependent on the different leagues using the soccer fields, but I think day in and day out, there wouldn't be much traffic. It's just going to be those that are utilizing the play trail or the walking trails.
Yeah, it's not a consistent traffic, but there are going to be times, on the weekends when they're holding soccer games and stuff that you're going to see obviously more traffic, and maybe at hours that are kind of after working hours. So yeah, traffic is always an issue. So yeah. Okay. Why two soccer fields in lieu of one soccer field and a basketball court or baseball, softball field? Nothing.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess I think the first proposal was 2 large soccer fields. And again, we came to the conclusion that that would be too much traffic. And we knew that with only access on Leo Drive, it just wasn't feasible. We didn't want the neighborhood to be overwhelmed with that much traffic. So we kind of scaled it down to 1 soccer field and then maybe a small practice field. There was some talk about having a basketball court, but I think this is just kind of what we came up with, maximizing the most of our space.
I'll make one comment. So I know it shows up on the screen as a regulation soccer field, but that kind of gives the person looking at it an idea of what the size is. These are recreation fields, so they can be utilized for any sport.
Good point.
One regulation size field, and we have another smaller recreation field. So whether it's used for soccer or lacrosse or whatever, I mean, that's, to be seen, but the recreation fields.
Yeah. Right. That's a good point. It's only shown as striped as soccer just to get the idea of how big the field actually is. It can be utilized with by lacrosse, frisbee, you name it.
John, I just want to add a couple more things too. I think the idea of a basketball court is a great idea. I think tennis court, a great idea. I think we should look at something like that. I think we should get the feedback from our the Public Works and Recreation Commission on what the needs are within the city, and obviously the residents on the call tonight. I mean, if you really think that there is a need for a basketball court down there or a tennis court, let us know, because that's something if the need's there, then let's consider it.
And I think there's also a cost that comes with this too. Is if you're talking about the tennis courts and the basketball courts, obviously the installation of that, the pavement, the fencing, the hoops, and it's going to be at a higher price tag than, say, just having a practice field that is completely lawn. So there's that standpoint too, that you're going to have like the money that's going into the park, where are we spending it and how are we spending it too.
Again, John, that's something for the taxpayers need to decide. The residents need to decide what is really needed, what they want, and if they're willing to pay for it at the end of the day.
Let's see. Next question. Is the plan to use these fields for Gardner youth soccer? What will be done to address increased traffic through our residential neighborhood? I think we've answered that. Will there be ability to close the space at dusk, perhaps with a gate? This is an isolated property, and I anticipate people/kids entering at night. So this was
John. So I just real quick. I mean, something that's been discussed. We'll continue to discuss it, but there's nothing we can't come to any type of final decision on that right now. But that's something that should continually be brought up by the residents and should be continue to be part of the discussion. But at this point, there has been, nothing written in stone as far as putting a gate in to stop people from going in.
And I think, oh, we have some more. Let's see. So this one is from Lizzie Kazinskis. Sorry if I said that wrong. Ward 2 City Councilor in Gardner. She has not received any feedback from residents expressing that they did not want a soccer field. So more of a comment than anything. Brookside Drive is the reason, Brookside Drive. Is there a reason? Oh, this is from Megan on 173 Brookside Drive. Is there a reason for 145 parking spaces? That seems like a lot for a neighborhood like this. I think I can take that, and then maybe you guys can build off of that. I think what the aim is and the whole reason why we kind of left it as a gravel area is to generally, yes, I mean, it does sound like 150 parking spaces is a lot of parking spaces. But when you have say you have 3 soccer games going, you have a playground in use, you have people walking the trails, then that number of people kind of grows, and we obviously don't want people parking on Leo Drive or outside of the park. So we were aimed to kind of maximize the parking as we saw the need and the ability to actually put these spaces in. Let's see. Another one. Fields require significant maintenance. Gardner won't do the maintenance. The field is not secured like Watkins Field or Stonefield. How will it be accessible and protected?
This is Jeff. I just, the DPW does a good job of maintaining our parks and playgrounds citywide. There are other fields that they maintain, like the Wilder Field, that they do a good job keeping mowed and maintained. And I would anticipate this would just be part of their same maintenance routine to maintain the fields in the park. There's also been some interest if it is used by Chair City Youth Soccer, that they've expressed interest in helping to maintain the fields as far as mowing and lining the fields and things like that go. They've expressed an interest in doing that sort of as a stewardship thing if they're one of the users of the field. So we would expect that our DPW would do a good job maintaining and taking care of the field, and that stewardship agreements like that are a good possibility.
Next question. Why weren't the Leo Drive abutters not notified of this public session? The city required this for the former developer.
John, can you repeat that, please?
It says, why weren't the Leo Drive abutters notified of this public session? The city required this of the former developer.
Well, actually, we did. We sent letters out to the whole neighborhood with the information to sign up for this event. Onto the go-to webinar. We sent letters along with directions to everybody within the neighborhood. Over 250 letters went out to the neighborhood.
Great. It says fields require.
John,
sorry.
I just want we apologize if somebody did not receive adequate notification, but we made a serious effort.
Fields require fertilizer. How will fertilizer impact Bailey Brook? Algal bloom probably will not be healthy.
I'll just speak to that. Seeing that it's close to conservation area, I think that'll be kept in mind, and we'll have a conscious effort to talk with DPW about that to ensure that it's any type of fertilizers or proper.
The soil conditions out there are really good, and the hope is with the site grading and site work that the forest topsoil that's out there, that's a good quality soil, is going to be maintained and respread and used on the fields. And there are alternative methods to chemical fertilizers, natural products that provide nitrogen to the soil. The Conservation Commission does usually take those things into consideration in anything that comes in front of them, as this will. And the different types of natural methods are typically no more expensive than, they're in some cases even less expensive than chemical fertilizers. And additionally, the seed mixture that you choose to use on a field like this can come into play as well. And a mix of grasses and microclover would keep the nitrogen levels in the soil and keep the grasses healthy and moist, more so than just a straight grass mix. So considering a different type of mix, conservation mix with microclover in it, is something that will probably be looked at too. The idea here is to keep this area as natural as possible and to not have any negative impacts on Bailey Brook. So I know that that the planning department and the Conservation Commission in particular will work closely with our DPW to make sure that that's the case, because ultimately Bailey Brook is an important resource, and you don't want to negatively impact the Bailey Brook as a result of this positive thing here in a park. So the two of those things can work together, and there are examples of good measures and sound practices so that those do work together. And in this particular case, I think it's really important to look at that. The same reason why rain gardens are an important part of this design is to minimize and prevent any negative impacts to Bailey Brook. So that's something that's important to everybody here within the city. It's an important public resource, and we're looking to protect it, not to negatively impact it.
All right. Will Leo Drive get paved as it's in poor condition, and would we speak about additional traffic, it'll only get worse?
So that's something that, I mean, not as part of this project per se, but it's something that if it needs to be, that, the residents should really bring up to their city councilors, the mayor, and the DPW. And, I'm sure the DPW has their priority list put together for paving projects, and depending on what happens here, the timeline and all that, maybe that Leo Drive gets moved up on the priority list. I'm sure it's on their target list. I just don't know whereabouts it is. So that's something we'll have to do a little more research on.
The next question is a two-parter, and I believe that we've answered both. One was, is this going to be an authorized use exclusive for soccer? The answer is no. And how do you anticipate controlling the traffic throughout the neighborhoods with children? Again, I think we've addressed the traffic questions.
I mean, John, well, just, as far as, it's any neighborhood, signage is key. Education to the public is key for people that are utilizing it. So, I think we'll just have to stay on top of it and make sure we have the necessary signage and all that in place. And if you have leagues utilizing, the fields, then, it needs to be said through the leagues that, it's a residential area and the city allows us to use the fields, but we need to respect the neighborhoods. And I know we do it in the town that my daughter plays in, has played in over the past decade, and it's about respect and education, and we just need to rely on people. And not everybody adheres to it, obviously, but that's one way of doing it, though.
Next question. How close does the walking trail loop come to the Leo Drive residence? I can answer that one. The walking trail loop, I believe that's the one that we're talking about, the accessible walking trail around the fields. And it would be about 30 feet away from the property line of the residences, but on the west side of the landscape buffer. So there would be an additional landscape buffer in between that walking trail along the Leo Drive residences.
Hey, John, can you zoom back out on a site plan that shows the entire site, please?
Sure.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Next
So
question. Oh, sorry.
John,
Yeah.
you're just referencing the walking trail that goes along the gravel parking drive area, correct?
Yeah. The if I can use my cursor here, people are looking at the video. It would be around the play fields and around here, and then back this way. I believe that's what the question was about. Was how close does this walk to those residences?
And then the other trail system to the south of that is probably what, double that, like 60 feet from?
Yeah, yep. And then also these trails shown are closely mimic the existing foot trails that are already in place. There are some legs of those trails that actually go up to the residences, but these are kind of the main trail system that the surveyors picked up out there. There is another trail that we looked at that kind of went along the western side of this property that we'll probably take a look at as well. Will the area be gated at night except when planned supervised events are held? We already talked about gating it off. There was talk of additional access to the walking path via the southern section on Leo Drive. Can you talk more about it? I'm guessing he's talking about this area, this right of way. Nothing is proposed for that area. I think we wanted to look at potential access points all around the site, and the four main access points that we looked at were off of Clark Street, and then another additional with this right of way here, the right of way across from Margot Way, and then the one on the northern end of the property. For vehicular access, none of the other ones really made sense. But I'm not sure. I don't think we've discussed putting walking trails through that area.
John, if I may just comment on that real quick. We did actually look at the potential of having another outlet access point further north at that right away where the cul-de-sac used to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a potential if just didn't want to bring cars further into the neighborhood. But if it needs to be a secondary access egress point, then that would probably make the most sense because of the topography. It's a little easier to develop, less expensive not as long of a driveway, so to speak, from a cost standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, even in that area, it's challenging. There is some good topography that comes off of Leo Drive to the site. We'd be digging in pretty good to a hillside in that area. Is it possible? Yes, but is it the most feasible? Probably not. And that's why we did end the that parking arm in a roundabout, so that the emergency vehicles had room to turn around rather than exiting out that area. We were just kind of nervous about the sloping topography in that area. But if if there needs to be a secondary access, it could be an area that we take a second look at. Is there a timetable on the proposed walking trail system?
This is Jeff. I'll answer that one. The proposed the walking trails are part of the initial phase of the project, which would begin later this summer and carry through next spring, or FY21. So the summer of 2020 until the spring of 2021. Ending at the end of June 21. That initial phase does include the development of the trails as part of that grant funding that's been awarded by the state through the park grant. So the trail system would be one of the initial steps. Trails and just general site grading are the two main components of that first phase of development.
So Jeff, with you saying that, can you just speak, and I'm not sure if you or John hit on it specifically, but the phasing of this project, how it's going to play out with the funding that we've currently received and the funding that we'll have to apply for in the future. Because these playing fields, recreation fields, will not be developed anytime soon. So, and I'm not sure if anybody really hit on it specifically, but you were kind of hitting on it there, Jeff. I thought you might want to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. I'll be happy to expand on that. Yeah, that's exactly right. The first phase of this project and what's been funded through the park grant is only for design, and that design is happening now this spring, and we'll be finishing up early summer, late spring, early summer. And the first phase of development, the portion that's funded, is only, again, for site work, making the site accessible and grading, and for the trail work. Other than that, any of the amenities that you see, such as fields, parking areas, playgrounds, any structures or features, none of those have been funded yet at this time. And they're really if the first year of this project is the design and site work, in the following years, 3, 4, and 5 is really the time period that you'd see the park being developed out. So it is a process, and any real development of a park is going to require additional grant funding and or city funding combined with grant funding to actually develop out a park. And with a park of this size and in a completely undeveloped landscape, that's a process that is probably going to need to be done in multiple phases, slowly, again, over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. So this is nothing that's happening tomorrow. This initial phase is just to design it and make the site accessible and provide some trails for recreation until a park or playground can be developed later on in those later phases.
And by having a final design, it helps us move forward with actually getting the funding necessary for the build out of the ultimate park.
Okay, next question. Are there any plans to use the other right-of-ways from Leo Drive? I believe we we've covered that. We did look into it. They aren't out of the question right now, but the right of way across from Margot Way seems the most doable at this point.
Yeah, this is Jeff again. The only thing I could really see those being used as are pedestrian accesses for the neighborhood residents. I mean, like you said, John, it didn't look feasible to develop those out for secondary access roads, and it doesn't seem necessary. But because it's a large piece of land with a lot of recreation area outside of the main park and playground area, pedestrian access for trails and things of that nature for the walking paths are a possibility to access the property through those access points, but nothing more than parks or trails as far as it's been looked at this point. And even that's something that would have to be discussed and determined if there's a need for it and if it's worthwhile and something that's desirable.
Okay, next question / comment here. So appreciate your comments and insight on the parking on Leo. The other concern regarding parking is at the other access point if implemented. And I think they're talking about the roundabout access point, and at this point in the design, it would be more of an emergency access rather than vehicular access.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. I mean,
Yeah.
we are told by the fire department, the police, that they need something. It's probably not going to happen. It's just not effective anyways.
Right. Will the soccer fields be available to use by schools? If so, then there are concerns about buses utilizing nearby roads such as Fernwood Drive, Leo Drive to access the park. Nothing.
I guess I would just have to add if there, I mean, there's already buses that pick children up in the area, so I wouldn't see that being a huge issue of the buses. And I wouldn't think with only one playing field that there would be a great deal of buses.
Right. And the design would, as traffic through the site, I think it would be fine. We are able to get an emergency vehicle, fire engine throughout this site. So if the concern is getting buses through the site, there's no concern there. I'm just not sure about the concern about buses through Fernwood Drive or Leo Drive. Next one is a comment. Is a great opportunity to showcase Gardner's hiking trails to visitors. So there's a follow-on question to the Dunn Park question. It says Dunn's had exercise elements on the 83-mile Pond Loop Trail. The state kept them up for a couple of years, then ignored the elements as they decayed when budgets failed. How does the city keep the elements in good condition?
So, okay, Dunn's Park, that was done in the 90s.
Yeah.
So, I mean, stuff is 30, 40 years old. It's gonna outlive itself, eventually. So, and unfortunately, the Heritage State Park program, the funding went out the door, like 4 years after they created it. So the concept, the state dropped the ball on it. So in this case, it's a city recreation facility that the city has a vested interest in maintaining and keeping up. And that's what I foresee happening.
Next question, will there be grilling around / family hangout / picnic areas for those not into soccer or trail walking? I can slightly answer that and you guys can follow up. That we have discussed implementing picnic tables, benches. We never discussed the grilling, but obviously in the park it provides, we could provide some opportunities to do that sort of stuff. There's areas around the play trail area where picnic tables could be implemented, and yeah, so there's opportunity, absolutely. Did we discuss them up to this point? Maybe not the grilling, but definitely a picnic area or picnic tables. All right, next question. Clark Street is scheduled to have water main construction going on possibly this summer. Will the park department happen? Oh, will the park development happen after the water main construction is completed, as this will cause much traffic backup onto Clark Street? So I guess the quick answer is no, that the construction of this park is kind of further out in the future, and Jeff touched on that earlier. Next question, what provision has been made for a secondary emergency access, and how will the park be closed nighttime partying, vandalism, and off-road vehicles? We've gone over some of those. The secondary emergency access, currently it does not show a secondary emergency access, but we did discuss the possibility of coming out on that northern area of Leo Drive. And for the nighttime partying, vandalizing, and off-road vehicles, again, I think we addressed that earlier on, and it would be up to the city to patrol the area. Okay, next question / comment. My discussions with the neighborhood indicated decent support for a woodland park area with walking trails and small elements, while there was not much support for fields. Why do we go away from what the neighborhood would like and what they expressed at the September informational meeting?
I think we took into consideration what the comments were at the initial meeting. I think we developed a woodland park with a portion of the site. I mean, actually, the majority of the site, including on the west side of Bailey Brook, which is going to be even more of a extension of the trail system, moving north into the Alasaskis property that we purchased a couple of years prior. This obviously is being done to provide a neighborhood park, but it's a city-wide project. It's a city project, so we want the people in this neighborhood to benefit from it. However, obviously it's probably going to be utilized by residents outside the neighborhood at certain times. This is really one of the only areas, if the only area, that we've identified to construct additional recreation fields. I mean, it's just that's the simple response to that.
And that comes into falls into the next question. It's how do we keep people outside the neighborhood from parking there on Halloween?
Say that again, John?
So how do we keep people outside the neighborhood from parking there on Halloween?
On Halloween?
Yeah. I think that falls in line with, you know, do we have gated access on Leo Drive and close it down at a certain time? I think further down the road, those are going to be questions that we try to answer.
Yeah, John, I think if it becomes an issue, it's something that would be addressed, but up front, we wouldn't just assume that the parking lot would be full and people were going to be going there for trick or treating. So I think, again, it's something that over time would be addressed. And if there was an issue and more concern, we would definitely implement something to prevent that.
Great. Next. Oh, fingers crossed for a basketball court. Let's consider switching out the practice field for a basketball court. Smiley face. So someone really wants a basketball court there. Next question. How will the public reserve the courts and field if not established now? Will there be a process?
This is Jeff. I think that the DPW does have a process in place for large groups or reserving areas within parks for specific uses. So I think that's something that they do have a permit process or an approval process in place already. But otherwise, like any of the parks and playgrounds, the public parks and playgrounds citywide, it will be open and accessible to the public anytime that there's not organized team use or some other organized event going on. It would be available for use. If there was some desire to have an organized or a structured event or to reserve a certain area, the Department of Public Works has a process in place for that at other parks and playgrounds and would probably follow the same process.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I don't know, but that's something we can look into, but I think Jeff just answered it.
The next three comments are basketball court. So someone wants a basketball court. The next comment after that would be the city cannot and will not maintain the island on Leo Drive. When and how are they going to maintain the property?
So we've been in contact with the DPW and they maintain these parks. And this is something that they feel they can maintain.
Okay.
Next question.
Next question. Natural grass fields. What exactly does the buffer zone consist of? Bushes, trees. What type of privacy should the residents expect when it's completed? I can start to answer that. Typically, it would be a mixed buffer with mainly evergreen trees and a mix of deciduous flowering trees or deciduous trees, just to make it look not so man-made and built. But there would be a significant buffer between the residences.
Done?
Yeah, I'm done with that. Yeah.
How many more questions you got?
We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, let's make that the last one, the last 5, because we're supposed to have a 7:30 time frame here, and I want to give, if some people don't have the option of being on this webinar, if they're just phoned in. Do you know if you have just any phone-ins?
I don't know. Jim Whitehouse, are you there? Do we have
Yeah,
the phone?
I'm here. What I was going to say is maybe it would be good to throw up that last slide again with how to contact for phone-ins and other questions.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and if we don't answer somebody's question, there, I said earlier on that we're gonna put this presentation up on the city's website, and any other questions could be posed to Lindsay, and her contact information is there, although I don't see her email address, but we can get that up on the city's website.
So my email address is on the city website under conservation. And I think it would be helpful too for those who want this basketball court. If you send that in an email, that's something, you know, if we find a large request for that, it's something we definitely look at.
Great. Okay, yeah, so we'll just finish up these questions we have right here, and we'll call it a webinar. What is the cost of the project, and how will we acquire the funding?
I can speak to that. This is Jeff. In my previous position, I worked on acquiring the grants for this design phase and initial site work. So far at this point, the only funding that's acquired for any development phase is what we currently have now for this design process and for the initial site access, which is basically site work, land clearing and grading in the central area, and trail work. And right now, those are the only portions of any development that are funded. And future development like fields, playgrounds, other features and amenities, and the finalizing a parking area and access road would be done through future funding sources. So funding would be acquired in the future, again, years 2, 3, even 4 and 5 over the next several years to develop out the park. Primarily, we'd probably be looking at other sources of state and federal funding, similar to the park grant that we've acquired here, and maybe even the park grant or other state and federal funds. Primarily, anything that we do with conservation or parks and playgrounds, we typically have good success of getting at least 70% of it funded through those state and federal sources. So that would be the goal, to reach out for grant funding to fund the park, to minimize any expenses to city taxpayers. So the park grant, we've been fortunate here in Gardner to have a 70-30 split, basically. 70% of all the funding comes through the park grant program. And we're going to try to continue that over the next several years as Lindsay continues to work on these projects as the new planning agent, and Trevor, and even myself in some respects in my position now. But we would be seeking sources of funding to do that in the future.
Jeff, what's the amount that we're currently looking at for this phase 1?
So the current amount, the park grant has funded $400,000 worth of development, and the city is committed to up to $120,000 thereabouts. I don't quote me on that number, but that approximate number is accurate. The city's in somewhere in the $120,000 range. Basically, the city's committed to approximately 30% of the cost, but we've received a full $400,000 from the park grant to design and do the initial site development of this park. And again, that's the maximum grant award that you can get through the park grant, and we were able to secure that maximum amount, the $400,000, for this purpose. So that's where it is currently.
Jeff, just for the public information too, do you recall what the acquisition costs were?
No, I don't recall specifically what the full acquisition costs were exactly, but I do know that the city portion was less than $50,000, and it was actually less than the 30%. The land grant and the park grant both have that 70% cost contribution to these projects. So this particular acquisition, broken down between the two grants, I believe for the park portion, it was, it's hard, I can't say specifically, but I know the city cost for both the park and the conservation property was, I believe, $50,000 to $60,000. And again, it was less than 30% of the total cost for the acquisition.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I really apologize. Actually, if you had asked me that even a month or two ago, I would have known that answer specifically. But I'm managing other projects now, and I'm sorry I didn't have the specific number, because at one point I would have been able to list all of the numbers for you for these projects. And we do have that information, so we can make that available. It is part of the public record. It's through the council meetings and the minutes for that and things of that nature. But I apologize, I can't give you the specific number right now. But what I can say is that the city cost is actually less than 30%, because there was a federal grant that came in for wetlands protection on the conservation side. There was a land donation by the Amelias. A portion of the value was donated. And then there was the park and the land grant funding that came in. So there were a lot of funding sources that came in to really minimize the actual city expenses, to the point where the city ended up actually acquiring the land for less than their 30% contribution that they would have had to make if it was just the land or park grant. Those other things came into play too. So as far as the value goes, the city's gotten a pretty good deal, I guess you could say, on this. We've had to contribute a small amount of money relative to the other state and federal funds that have gone into it. So we've been lucky there, and we've minimized costs to the city and to the taxpayers.
Okay, moving along here. We'll have a couple more here. We already have signage, and people are still speed through the neighborhood. Traffic is a major concern if the only access to the park is through our neighborhood. I think we've talked about the traffic concerns. And it says, the next one is, can you connect these trails to the Rome conservation area?
I'll jump in on this one again too, and I'll let Lindsay comment if she'd like as well. Technically, yes, you can connect these trails to the Rome conservation area. A footbridge is going to be needed across Bailey Brook, but there's an ideal location for it. The loggers a few years ago, when they did the logging operation, had a stream crossing where they put in a temporary footbridge. It almost would have been nice if they left it in, actually, thinking back, but we didn't know we would be here at this point. But yeah, there's a location for the picture that you're looking at on your screen right now, as a matter of fact, is the approximate location where a footbridge could go in to cross Bailey Brook. On the other side of Bailey Brook, when you get into the conservation land, there's an existing trail that follows Bailey Brook north, and that trail connects to the trail system that already exists, an old cart road and trail at the Alashauskas property, which then goes out to the field on Howard Street, the old Alashauskas farm of the Alashauskas conservation area. So that trail already connects to the Alashauskas land, and then on the other side, it connects separated by the river, but the Alashauskas property then connects to the Rome conservation land. I've walked it, scouted it out, as well as one or two members of the Conservation Commission, in addition to folks from North County Land Trust. We've been out there, we've looked at it, and we have a couple of potential paths scouted out to make that final connection. The only limiting factor is a couple of trail bridges that would have to be put over Bailey Brook, which will make ideal Boy Scout projects in the future. So that's something that we foresee. And you know, we would like to do that because, I mean, a network of trails like that would mean that you would have really 10 to 15 miles worth of trails when you connect to Alashauskis, Rome, City Forest, Pearly Brook area on the other side, and then essentially to the bike path as well, all in one large network of trails. So making these connections is a big part of the early planning part of this project, and it's a challenge that we look forward to implementing to connect all of those trails in the future so that people can enjoy them for walking, jogging, hiking, mountain biking, and things like that. So the trails exist, and the potential for the connections is really just a couple of trail bridges away.
Okay, a couple more here. Isn't there supposed to be a secondary entrance for emergency vehicles? I think we would be advised by the fire and police if that is the case. There are times when there is a hardship of land and it's not doable. So, but yes, if it's required by either fire or police or the emergency, any emergency vehicles need to gain access a separate way, then yes, we'd have to look at a secondary entry. Next one is the Halloween. We get over 200 kids for Halloween. That's a lot of kids for Halloween. Jeez. The next couple are just comments. Says, I'll be blunt, how can we block the fields from going in? I'm new to this process and I'm not loving the idea of large fields. I'm all for tennis courts, basketball courts. Thank you for the city for conserving the property. And that's it. That's all we got. So just to recap, we are going to have this recording published on the city website. So if for some reason you know someone who didn't get a chance to listen in or view the PowerPoint presentation, just let them know that it'll be up there. And any questions that didn't get answered tonight, Lindsay can respond to those. So if that's all, Trevor, Lindsay.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for participating tonight. I think we got some really good feedback. We really appreciate your comments. It helped a lot. You know, we try to take as much of it as we can into consideration, but we can't do everything. We can't consider everything. But, you know, just stay informed. We'll try to keep you informed as far as how this moves forward. And numerous meetings. It'll be before the planning board on the 14th, next Thursday, for a presentation. It's a go-to meeting, and posted on the website most likely tomorrow or Friday. So you're welcome to join in there too.
All right, so this concludes the public info session. I'm going to stop recording now, and everyone stay safe and healthy out there. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.